A warm welcome to the Renewal Conversations, part of the Renewal Nuggets. I'm Dr. Ioana Popa, and I love integrating science, psychology, spiritual care, and ancient Christian faith, the Orthodox Christian faith. And I have the pleasure today to introduce a wonderful psychologist, which I love and respect, Dr. Roxanne Louh. And she's a clinical psychologist in Jacksonville, Florida. So she uses her extensive training in private practice, but also as a speaker. She brings expertise in a lot of topics, including mood disorder, anxiety disorder, marriage and parenting issues, eating disorder, body image awareness, women's health. And she presented to national groups and universities and churches, high schools all over the country. And by training, she has 2 masters and 1 doctorate in clinical psychology. And she worked through her graduate work and afterwards with empowering women around body image awareness, body health, stress management, emotional health. She also worked as a clinical director in a hospital for treating children with and preventing eating disorders. And she opened her private practice in 2006. Now, she continues to dedicate much work in her ministry in community-wide presentations. She's trying to reach the public through news, presentations, social media, radio, educational talks, and blogs. And she really believes in prevention and mental health and preserving the mental health education. And I met her through OCAMPR, which is the Orthodox Christian Association of Medicine, Psychology, and Religion, which is a national organization in America, United States. And I just really appreciate the wealth of information and training and life experience. It's just a delightful, wonderful, and inspiring human being. And without further ado, we're going to dive right in. I'm going to invite Dr. Roxanne. Welcome, Dr. Roxanne Louh. So exciting to be here. I know we met at OCAMPR and we really hit the ground running, and it was just such a beautiful connection. And I had a pleasure to be with with the ministry that you're doing and all the interviews and beautiful podcasts that you and live shows that you're doing and your book. So I'm really excited to have you today, and maybe we can just jump right in and saying hello. And
absolutely. I'm so excited to be here with you, Ioana.
Yeah, so I'd love to start. I know you're a psychologist and you've done lots of trainings and you're in private practice, but as a giver, because this renewal conversation is especially geared for givers, and then people that have a heart to help others. What has been your journey as a giver, and you landed in this profession? You're helping people all day long. So what has been that like?
Well, my husband and I always like to say you can't plan where you're going to end up and the purpose you're going to be living. You attempt it, but the world kind of gathers around you and carves the way. And as a psychologist, being married to a priest, you would think that we have it all together and we know and can taper every response to the appropriate healthy amount, when you're dealing with stress. But about 6 years ago, I would say that we were in a good season of life, as life tends to take us in these cycles. And we were hit on our 10-year wedding anniversary with a house fire that almost burned our home down. We had to move out of the house for about 10 months. Thank God we were okay, but we had to leave our home for about a period of 10 months. And just as we were coming back, this was a very stressful time. Our children were very small. They were not, didn't do good with the transition. And just as we were coming back into the home, my husband took a missions trip and came back really filled with joy and peace. And it was just a beautiful, I would say, life-changing experience to leave the world we know and serve in another way, in a deep way. And when he returned from that trip, this is a good season. We're living back in our home. He's come back from a renewing experience. And we were hit with his father. We received a phone call on the road that his father had been taken to the emergency room. He had had a massive seizure or a stroke. They weren't sure. and they didn't think he was going to pull through. And they said, come now, so we came. By the grace of God, he pulled through it, but only to find out that the seizure was in fact induced by a very aggressive form of cancer that we didn't know he had, a very rare form, they called it. And so we began the journey of this sort of very stressful experience. And his dad was a very healthy person prior to this. And so within a week of that phone call and that experience, my dad was going in for routine hernia surgery. And my mom calls me in the midst of the surgery, and she said, you have, come now. Your dad has they've just couldn't complete the surgery. They discovered cancer, and it is everywhere in his abdomen. There was a 14-pound tumor, and they're giving him 4 months to live. This was the phone call. Come
Wow.
now. And so here
Sorry.
we are, like, divide and conquer. And this becomes hard because who do you lean on the most when you enter a stressful experience? Your family, your husband. So our families are compromised, and we are both compromised, and we're raising small children, and we both have careers. So, pulling. And so this was a time where I would say our emotions were pushed to capacity with what we could endure, but yet had to push through. So we were operating at the edge of our capacities. And, that brought us to this journey of what we do now, which is really trying to help bring to others some of our shared experience of what we've learned was necessary during times like that. Because you can have all the education in the world, but when you're in the midst of an emotion, very strong emotions, and the support system around you is crumbling, you have to find something else, something deeper. And we were brought to our knees in such a way that we had to learn what real self-care looks like, what real renewal looks like in order to keep going. Because this was not an acute journey, it was a chronic one. It was a long, we had a long journey ahead. We didn't know how long it was going to be. And so I think the rest of the world experiences these sorts of things. We're not alone in that. Everybody has these seasons of life, these trials of life, and we have to figure out how to come up for air. Otherwise, we just keep sinking. And so this was our journey. This is how we as givers sort of learn to kind of help other people who are giving to figure out what do we need in order to continue to give. Because in that time, we still had to minister. We still had to see patients. We still had to, minister to our families, to each other at different times. And it was not an easy feat. But that was the journey, I think, that I would say has had the biggest impact on where we are now and the experiences that we operate out of and teach from.
I'm so sorry you had to go through this, and your dad.
Yeah, so both of our fathers have since passed from their cancers, and but the grace of God and our faith really was an immense support. We could see His hand in all of it as we walked through it. So thank God we had that support system. But it was still no easy feat because we are human beings and we have emotion, and so it was really a tough time.
Yeah, blessed memories. And
Thank you.
it sounds like out of that, all that pain and suffering, in a certain sense, there's so much growth that happened in a certain way. I really love what you said about renewal becoming real. It's one thing to learn in the books. Okay, we're going to do this, and in trainings and our professional experience, and another thing to go through our own difficulties. I know I burned out twice, and it does become real. The first time I didn't even notice because it was more of that chronic kind of stress, versus the second time was more intense, more evaluated. But I so appreciate what you said. It does have to become real. And you mentioned that this is what propelled you in the ministry you're doing now. Do you want to share a bit of what are you doing? I know a bit about, so it'll be so exciting for our audience to really all the things.
So I believe we're all equipped with, sets of gifts and a purpose, a deeper meaning, things that we were equipped to do in this life, right? But dark seasons in our life, tough seasons, they throw us off from being able to live that life. And so our goal really is to sort of help equip people with how do you deal with these major impactful variables in your life when life isn't in a perfect season. How do you learn to care for yourself in such a way that you can continue to work toward your purpose and have a deeper meaning in this world and not let it basically force you to fall apart. Of course, we had many moments of falling apart, but we don't want to stay falling apart.
Yes.
And so that's a lot of what we do now is sort of living with intention, a lot of intentionality, a lot of mindfulness. Physical exercise for us during that time used to be a good idea. It was something that we enjoyed doing. After this season, it became prescriptive, a necessary foundation for the day to occur and unfold in a way that we could manage.
Mm.
It became a stabilizing force for us that we still to this day are very protective over our ability to move, to release that adrenaline, that buildup. And so exercise was a foundational force. Eating well, learning how to eat amidst the storms was also something that became prescriptive. We became, very, very focused on what we eat and making sure that we are eating. And, it's amazing how little things like that if we don't protect, and they're just good ideas, our body starts to get away from us before our minds can slow it down.
Mm.
And the body is moving faster and our minds and souls are, saying, wait a minute. And so those things became, I would say, foundational.
Mhm.
And there are many, I would say many behaviors and habits that we sort of developed over the last 6 years. Learning to even empty and put words on what we feel regularly became something we,
Yes.
protected time for, because I'm probably more of an internal processor and my husband is more of an external processor. But in those times, there were moments when no one was processing. It's just feeling. The feelings were so heavy we couldn't even articulate.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
that emotional connection starts to disintegrate because we're not living in each other's inner worlds. We're not even able to articulate and meet ourselves in that place ourselves. So learning to sort of unpack those feelings and not be so afraid of them
Yes.
was
Love that.
something we had to learn to do, and still do often. We sort of protect this time once a week to unpack everything from the week and whatever we're dealing with. And it helps to bring that emotional connection to each other through that unpacking and through that awareness. So, yeah, I mean, I think before all of this, it's a good idea to unpack and be emotionally connected with your spouse, but it's different when, you really experience a disconnection because you're living with such
Yes.
heaviness.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what makes you feel so alone if you're not able to articulate and put words on what's really going on beneath the surface.
Yes, yes. And we're such synchronicity because that's what I teach as well. And I've discovered through my own experience as well, taking care of the body, taking care of the emotions of the heart, taking care of the mind, of the thoughts in a regular basis, because otherwise the mind can go in circles all the time, and of our soul, of our spirit. And as you mentioned this is so cool. And I love it. Any tips right now? You mentioned the body, the eating healthy and the exercise, and just make it a prescriptive. It has to be done every week. You mentioned about the emotions. Do you want to share a few tips about what that unpacking might look like with a spouse or a family member, or even if someone is single, right? And they might have friends, or what that unpacking might look like. Some quick tips.
I would say that the notion of becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable would
Mm.
be a tip I would encourage. So often we are afraid of our inner world. We're looking for to escape it. We're not looking to meet it, to introduce ourselves and to share what's happening. But I learned that just because you don't acknowledge feelings doesn't mean they go away.
No,
Yeah,
they
right.
never go away. Yes.
They, yeah, are affect us more deeply, more covertly. And so I learned that it's okay to be uncomfortable. It's okay to feel broken. It's okay to meet myself in a space where I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know if I'm going to have the strength to cope. Those are very real feelings that we meet in our vulnerability. And it's okay to not know. It's okay.
Wow.
We find that strength. We do. We're somehow equipped as human beings in an
Yes.
amazing way to
Mhm.
do things we never thought we could do.
Yes. Yeah.
So, I would say one of the things I found helpful was solitude. So,
Mm.
unpacking my feelings with my husband was something that would often follow 5 days a week of solitude on walks. I would go out and walk in nature and unpack my
Yeah.
journey, my feelings for an hour. And it's amazing how movement helped me move those feelings to the surface.
I love that. That kind of energy to make it.
That energy, yeah, and being outside, it was grounding as I was
Yes.
experiencing it. Many people might say, oh, sit and just try to empty. That was hard for me because
Yes,
the
absolutely.
the body was reactive, and so I found that walking in solitude regularly helped me unpack, so that when I was able to sit down with him and unpack and share that inner world, I had met it already. And that is still something I do to this day, to unpack what I feel. Hmm.
I love that. And you bring so many nuggets here. One of them, which I experience the same with myself and other people that I guide, that it has to be individualized. Just because for some people it works to unpack and sit down and go internally and process, that doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone. So
Totally.
having that wisdom and trust in yourself, like, no, for me, it's the walking that moves. And I found the same. The walking
Hmm.
helps me. And the other thing that I love about what you said, which is such a beautiful nugget, if you're listening and you're an introvert, I love how you blended it. I mean, you just named that. I'm internal processor. My husband is external processor. So
Hmm.
part of your journey is you'll do the internal processing, but make it a point to then go and
Yeah.
share, which I love
Yes.
that.
Huge for introverts. If there are any
Yes,
introverts listening, make
absolutely.
your inner world available,
Yes.
because if you don't, no one can meet you in that space and support you
Yes.
in it.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's okay that it feels overwhelming to do so. Like, you'll walk through it, it's okay. But you won't
Yes.
feel so alone in that space when you're able to do that.
Yes, and having the balance that it's okay also not to feel put on the spot and having to process right away, but actually have time to process on your own, but then go and share. This is what you're describing with my husband, Sebastian. We're like in mirror. He's the internal processor, and I'm the external processor. And I have to remember that because I'm like, you didn't tell me this a few days ago. I was like, I know, I just had to think about it, and it just made so much sense.
Yes. Yes. And you really, you come to such insights on your own. And it's
Yes,
like, wow, I didn't realize I was thinking, oh, this is all coming together. Now I can, put
yes,
some words on it in a way that makes sense, instead of just dumping words
exactly.
that don't make sense, and don't even necessarily articulate what I'm truly feeling. And another thing that I found super, super helpful, so there's this sort of physical self-care that was prescriptive. There was the emotional self-care that was necessary. But then there's this pursuit of knowledge, the intellectual self-care, that's also really important, that I was very reliant on. I needed another source of wisdom outside my own head.
I love that.
Um, yeah, because in our own minds, when we are left with our thoughts, they are not always leading us well.
Yeah,
And so I really needed wisdom and knowledge to be poured in. And so, again, in movement, I would seek wisdom. And so, often, if I was not on a walk and I was, say, on a spin bike or elliptical, I would read. For me, I would read my Bible app, which is the Bible in 1 year. And I would read two entries, which are like 20 minutes each.
I love.
So it was like a 45-minute pouring in of this external wisdom that I needed to
Yes,
reset. And because I was moving, my mind, my heart, my soul was more open to receiving. amidst whatever I was experiencing, this sort of new knowledge, new way to look at it, new comfort, new strength,
Love that.
new frame of reference that I didn't even know that I needed until I read it. And I thought, wow. And that also helped me sort of further deepen what I was experiencing, what my fears were, what was going on for me. And so I would always try to read something while I was moving on a machine of some sort to kind of like take in what I needed. So not just like to understand what I'm feeling, but to also bring in outside wisdom that I relied upon.
This is
And I will
so
say it took me about a year and a half to get through reading the Bible in 1 year, but it's supposed to take a year. But, you know,
well, a year and a half is still very, very great timing.
but how powerful for me that external wisdom was. And I still to this day will try to read something that I think I might need to know or understand in the pursuit of knowledge that helps me reframe whatever it is I'm experiencing. So I think that protecting time for personal growth and attaining more wisdom
Mm,
is huge. I mean, and I don't know that we protect enough time for that in general in the busyness,
right.
fast-paced world we live in. You know, we're getting like books broken down into bullet point 5-minute summaries now. There's websites for this because we don't have the time to read. But however you pursue that knowledge and that wisdom, I think it's also important to be able to continue to grow and pursue that deeper purpose and not be derailed by
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, I love what you shared, and you and I were sharing the same faith, Orthodox Christianity, and I love because in Orthodox theology, there's this thinking about the nature of God and whatnot. There's this idea that the thoughts of God are outside of our consciousness, that God is everywhere, filling all things, but it's not a focus. It's not like a person, not a person, is not a object of our intellectual pursuit, but it's kind of everywhere. But the thoughts are coming outside of our consciousness, right? This is where we might get the light bulb moment or the insights. But also what you're sharing is through community, which is so important for Christianity, that it will come through other people's wisdom outside of our consciousness, and we can renew on the mind level. And it's so beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And how I love how also you integrate. Like you might exercise, that's helping for your body, it's helping for the mind, and in the same time, you're nurturing your mind and your soul, I would imagine, right?
100%. Like I feel they go in tandem.
Yes.
Like a synergy occurs when you receive wisdom while you're open to receiving it, or you're unpacking
Mhm.
because the adrenaline is down a little bit. It's a little easier to access or meet those emotions in that place. You
Yeah.
know, and just as sort of a nugget of like practical habit building, I would say, if
Mm.
there's already one habit you do really well and protect time for, it becomes easy to add another one into
Yes.
that,
Yes.
right? Because people tell me all the time, well, I don't have time to read this and exercise. And so like let's combine it,
Yes.
put something audibly on if you need to, or it just makes it a little bit easier and helps us be more successful at integrating some new self-care habits in a time and space that we've already protected for one type of self-care habit,
I
because we
love
only
that.
have so much time in the day.
Right, exactly. And it also helps with integration of this body, mind, heart, and soul, right? So
Yes,
yes, yeah. I
100%. Yes.
appreciate that. Would you like to share more about how your faith, and I mean, I know your faith is very important to you. I mean, your husband is a priest in the Orthodox Church, and you together, you have a mission, you have a live show, and you talk about that. Share more about how, how sometimes we grow up in a faith, but then at some point it becomes our own. We really start to, it's not just because this person said or that, which is great, but we internalize it. What was that for you, and how did faith help you in this process and throughout your life?
I would say the biggest transition in that faith journey was learning that I can't depend so much on myself for everything.
Mm.
And this is something you hear a lot as a faithful of any sort of believer, that you should rely on your faith and rely on God. But then we kind of coach from the sidelines and do it our own way. And there's a point at which you learn, even as a doer, that we need help.
Mhm.
We need help from from God. We need help from the people he's put in our lives. We need a sense of community, a sense of belonging. We learn that we have a capacity. And when it is reached, we fall to our knees and we need to ask for that help. And that's something that I would say this journey taught me, was how to rely on something outside of myself, which I wouldn't say I was very good at before this journey. I relied more on myself to say, and we can do that as long as we're not overextending our capacity. We tend to do things our own way, rely on ourselves. And I learned that you have to rely on something outside of yourself, to give you strength, to give you hope, to give you comfort, to give you encouragement, to know that you're not alone. And so that became a very real, something that was experienced, no longer a concept, to know that I wasn't alone and I had somebody who was fighting this with me. And I could trust in that protection and in that support. And I could see it all the way through. And there were so many dark moments where I may not have been able to feel God's presence. But as I look back, I now see in so many places, and we write about this in our book, where his hand was in all of it. And I think in any trial, all God yearns is for us to be able to lean on him and to recognize we can't do things by ourselves. We weren't meant to do things by ourselves. We're
Yeah.
supposed to learn how to be dependent. And even for those who are not faithful, I mean, learning to depend on people and community.
Yes. Yeah.
This is something that our world, there's a lot of lonely people in the world right now, that we've become very isolated. We try to do things on our own. We trust our own thoughts. And that's a dangerous place to live when you're not receiving anything from the outside in terms of support.
Right. That's right. Yeah, in our mind, we can just go in our stories, circular ways, and they might not be actually the reality or the truth.
Or the truth.
Many times
Right.
we say we have so many stories and there may be old conditionings or, I'm not a worthy, no one likes me and whatnot. And those stories, it might not be real actually, but they come, is understandable. People experience them because of their past or past experiences. But yeah, I really love that. And I wondered, as you were talking, it brought this idea. I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Lisa Miller. She's a researcher, and she's been doing research for 20 years in spirituality. And I
Oh,
just
wow.
was a psychologist, and she wrote a book which escapes you at the moment, but I'll make sure I'll put in the link in the YouTube. So she talks about, she did research on spirituality, and interestingly, people who, first of all, discover that people who are spiritual, whatever practice, they provides a buffer against depression. But also, it's very protective. It was so clear. Like it was not like just a little bit of a margin. It was extremely protective for depression. But also she flipped it and noticed through the data that people that have experienced depression or stressful times, actually they did rely and did discover spirituality. Almost like a
Yes.
is like you're talking about how we know we need to trust God or ultimate reality, however we might call it, but but when things happen and we actually have to rely on it and we learn to trust it, how much more amazing that capacity increases. So it just reminds me of that. I don't know if that resonates at all with what you were sharing.
100%. Yes, we know it intellectually, but we experience it when we are in our brokenness and when we are brought to our knees. And it's just a profound thing. I don't know that it's something you can teach. It's experienced
Yes.
knowledge. It's not taught knowledge, right? And this is
Right.
something I'd heard my whole life, but I'm like, oh, this is what it means. I understand.
Yes.
Even breathing, learning to breathe was something that, you're taught this in our professions, deep breathing, meditation, relaxation, you're taught all of it. And I never benefited from any of it until the last 6 years. It's a different experience of having learned how to take what I call a reset breath, to be able to calm the entire body, to even like tune in to where I hold stress always in my upper back and in my jaws. all the sort of clenched and tense muscles I didn't know that I, felt or was experiencing until I tuned in. And so maybe 5 or 6 times throughout the day, now I'll do a reset breath and tune in to my body, take a deep breath for in, and then a nice, slow, steady exhale as I drop my shoulders, release any tension, and I just kind of pause in a relaxed state for a couple of minutes. And I do that, all throughout the day. I could do it while I'm driving or while I'm sitting in my desk. I'll just sit back on my chair, and I find it resets me for the next couple of
Yes.
hours. And I didn't even realize that I was holding tension or I wasn't breathing.
Amazing.
We hold our breath, when we're anxious, and
Yes.
we don't even know it. I can stop breathing when I'm listening to somebody. If they're sharing something that I'm empathetically connected to, I can actually stop breathing as I'm listening. I'm holding my breath as I'm listening. And when I'm tuned in, I can feel that. And I have to
Yes.
release it and take that breath from deep in my abdomen. And that is something I learned in the last 6 years. I had heard about it and I had done it, but I never experienced its renewing effect until the
Yes.
last 6 years.
It became relevant. And I'm curious, you shared the steps. Would you be willing to just also experientially just do it? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but
Absolutely.
do it right here with you. Yeah. So if
Yeah.
you're listening, you got the steps, but you can just, if you're driving, obviously, or operating machinery, just pause and come back. But if you can,
So I would literally sit back in my chair, drop my shoulders, and take a deep breath from deep in my abdomen. And I usually put my hand on my lower abdomen so that I can feel the breath descending from deep within my abdomen. So I count in for 3 counts. And I exhale it out for 4 counts. And as I exhale, I'm releasing whatever tension still remains through my shoulders and in my jaws, in my face. And I usually would pause here and just breathe normally for the next couple of minutes. And then I return.
State. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it's just what I call a mini break throughout the day. And I've never done it. And this is interesting. I'm pausing in insight. I've never done it where I didn't have tension to release. I've never had an experience where I connected to do a reset breath and there was not tension here, and my breathing didn't need a reset.
Very much needed.
So it's all the time. And this is just a regular day. This isn't even in the midst of a dark season. So imagine how much more necessary, prescriptive, and frequent that would have been during the dark seasons. Yeah. And so I just recommend this for everyone. And to do it until you feel the renewal of it. In the beginning, it's just a practice, right? But eventually you start, it's just something you try. And a lot of people say, well, I don't feel a difference, but you will. The more you practice it, you keep doing it, the more you'll experience it.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's with any small, that's kind of a general suggestion, right? That with any small changes, people might not notice an impact right away. It's good to keep going, make it part of the routine. It takes 3 to 4 weeks. You might not even notice anything, but at least you're building the routine. And then
absolutely, absolutely.
And how about on a spiritual level, on a soul level? What are some of your practices? I know they're probably overlapping with whatever you shared before, but I'm curious what your thoughts are and what you might suggest and you do.
I mean, from a spiritual place, the unpacking always turns to prayer for me. When I unpack, that's the very things that become my prayers. Like, starts with me, goes to him, ends with him, comes back to me. So to see it as a back and forth movement, and wherever my mind takes me as I'm unpacking, I feel it is a place I should be and something that needs to be brought to him. So I don't try to
Okay.
contain or lead. I just sort of let my mind go. And I have a lot of people who tell me, oh, well, I feel so distracted when I pray. I'm like, well, that's maybe good, because maybe where your mind is wandering is a place you need to be, and
Yes,
you need
I
to
love
open.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the
Yeah,
sense of the prayer is not just, I'm going to say some words, here are the words, and I'm going to read or say out loud or memorize, but there's any encounter. I'm hearing you say any encounter is a prayer, right? The mind might be
1,000%.
distracted, you're with God. You have emotions, you're with God, and allow that back and forth.
Yeah, it's is a constant. Yeah, oh, I would say a constant. Anytime I'm unpacking, I'm trying to turn that into prayer, because it's
Mhm.
like a natural. I don't really. It just becomes that, right? Because I'm meeting an inner world that needs something. I might meet it with some of my psychology. I might try to reframe, how I'm seeing a certain situation. I might try to examine it from psychological perspective sometimes, and that's helpful. But no matter what, it's always coming back to what I'm not able to do on my own. I'm going to need his help for, and I want that army, fighting with me.
Yes.
And so I would say that that's my spiritual life is usually met with all of the unpacking, and
Mm.
then the wisdom that I will read about will usually be biblical. I mean, I read a lot of other things. Selfishly, I like psychology. I love to read about psychology. I can't get enough of
I'm in
psychology,
your
and
club, yes.
I love it. But I'm usually always reading something from a place of godly wisdom as well, because I think we need that. We need those constant resets, no matter how much we think we know.
Yeah.
I'm always reminded every decade how much more I needed to learn.
Mm.
Every decade, I look back and say, wow, I knew nothing that decade. Wow, that decade before was even worse. So I'm always humbled by there's so much more we need to know and understand and be willing to pursue. Um, and so, yeah, my spiritual journey is about trying to learn and become more of what I think I'm called to be. And that's a journey.
That's such a beautiful journey, and I love what you share because many times it feels for people, oh my goodness, we're just gonna do growth and then we're arrived and then we're done with growth, and that doesn't happen. It's a constant growth, right? And that's my experience as well. Like just because we're professionals, that doesn't mean we're not going to keep growing and be humbled and learn and make mistakes and just grow out of this. It's beautiful. And that's
Yeah,
such encouragement because sometimes it's very easy to compare, for people to compare with each other. Like, I'm hearing this beautiful wisdom and I'm not there yet, but they are, and people start feeling really bad about that. And it's a constant growth, especially
yes.
from where I'm sitting. That's kind of my observation, and it's very refreshing to hear you're experiencing the same way.
Oh, sure. I think we don't really know what we need to know until we need to know it,
Yes. Yeah.
right? So this is true that, this type of journey, trying to tell my younger self 10 years ago, hey, prepare for this because I don't know that I would have been able to
Mhm.
pursue it and learn it as I have, right? So we don't know what we
Absolutely.
need to know until we need to know it. So I
Mhm.
would say to, self-compassion, I think is necessary in our society. We have a lot of I'm not good enough, and we have a lot of critical voices, and working with patients I hear this all the time, condemning voices, critical voices.
Mhm.
And yes, that comes from our upbringing. It can also come from depression. It comes from a lot of different places, from over unrealistic standards. But I think if we can replace it with some self-compassion, for I will reach the stage of maturity I need when I need to mature,
Oh, I love
and
Yeah.
then I'll do better. I'll do better and move after that. But
I'm
to
going to
sort of
pause
respect
because I would love to you to say it again. I'm going to reach that level of maturity when
when I need
I
to
need to.
mature, right?
Yeah. And that's
Mhm.
true if you're 20, 30, 50, 70, 80, doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. There's Yeah. So we have to have a little bit of compassion, for we're all at different stages in our life's journey. And we don't know what's coming ahead. I don't know what new learning I'm going to need, 5 years from now. We just do our best with what we know. at the current time, and when we need more, we seek more. And this is the journey of life. I mean, this is how we grow. That's why we call the book Renewing You instead of
Yes.
Renewed You, right?
Yeah.
um, because it's always up until I'll never forget my dad. I asked him before he died, I said, do you have any nuggets of wisdom that you would want to share? And he said, life is like a mountain, you just keep climbing until you reach the top, but you probably won't reach it until you take your last breath. You just keep climbing.
Hmm.
And I thought that's so true. I mean, there is no like, you just keep going, and it's a continued pursuit. Sometimes it's treacherous, and sometimes it's easy. We reach that easier place, on the mountain, but it's a journey up. As soon as we stop going up permanently, we stopped living, right?
Hmm. Yeah. And in a certain sense, we're always going, even when
Always.
it feels like we're not. Yeah, this is a beautiful metaphor. I love and thank you for sharing your dad's wisdom. This is so
Yeah,
beautiful. Say
yeah.
more about your book. As we're wrapping up, I would love to for audience to really hear all the projects you're doing, the ministry, the book, the live show that you have, and maybe there's more projects. Maybe there's another book coming up. I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah. So we love writing. We're always working on more projects, and hopefully that will come to fruition in the next several years. We'll have more produced. But on our show, we have a show, Live with the Lows, and we deal with very, I would say, practical issues of daily life struggles that everybody has, and we try to share some practical tips on how to cope with it. So similar to our book sort of talks about how we can become sort of the best version of ourselves and stay on our path of purpose and meaning while dealing with the difficulty in our marriage, while dealing with somebody who offends us, upsets us, and we maybe don't want to forgive them, or dealing with parenting issues, dealing with vices and bad habits that we have developed over time living in the world that we live in. How do we cope with that? And so each chapter kind of addresses what I would say is a different issue that we've seen amidst everyone's lives that we all struggle with, us included. And we share a lot of our personal stories. We share work with people that my husband and I have both worked with. And so each chapter is sort of devoted to a different area of our life
Okay.
that we struggle with. And this is the show's purpose as well, sort of how to live with intention, stay on the path to purpose. And that can be found on Ancient Faith,
Yes.
Live with the Lows. And also on our Facebook page, we do a daily inspirational message that we send
Mhm.
out every morning,
Mhm.
Monday through Friday. So all they have to do is they could go to either our website at thelows.com, and that's an
Okay.
interesting spelling. It's LOUHS dot
Yes, and
com.
we'll put that in
Um,
the chat. We'll put that underneath the
that
video.
would be great. That would be great. All they have to hit is subscribe, and they'll get a little bit of dose of encouragement,
Great.
usually from something I've seen during the week that either I struggled with or
Mhm.
a patient of mine is struggling with. Because if we are struggling, I look at it as it's something everyone's struggling with. So
Exactly, right. So, and the book is Renewing You.
renewing you.
Yes.
It's actually renewing you, a priest, a psychologist, and a plan.
Okay, great. And we'll put the link. Is that link on the website, right? We'll put the link also on the YouTube to
Yes.
what to the book.
Yes. That
Awesome.
would be great. Thank you.
Any other projects upcoming? Anything cooking or
We're
baking?
definitely working, I would say we're definitely working on several manuscripts. We do a lot of speaking engagements in different places. So the ones that we get invited the most for, we believe should turn into book material. So those are things that
Okay.
we're, in the background trying to prepare and work toward. But everything takes time. And,
Yeah.
well, I told you before the show that someone once told me if she could give me any gift, it would be the gift of time. And I really resonated with that because there's so many things we want to do, and we just need time. So it's something to protect, something to enjoy, but something I think we always yearn for more of.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And any other nuggets of wisdom for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say in listening to this show, don't be hard on yourself about what you're not yet doing. To really have compassion and take it one step at a time. every step we take toward better caring for ourselves is really instrumental in the bigger picture of our lives, that we need down the road. So if it's, and start small, if you're someone who's never walked before, try just a 10-minute, stroll around the block. We're not trying for an hour, 5 days a week. We just, start small with something that feels doable.
Yes.
And really to watch that inner critic, that it doesn't become too critical about what I'm not doing. The New Year's resolution time is always a tricky moment, because we look at our life and we come up with all these things that are wrong, and we set out to do all of these huge changes. And I think we just have to start very small,
Mhm.
taking very small steps, that we fold into our calendar so that they actually happen, and that we're kind to ourselves when they don't. We just kind of get curious about why, and we try to learn from that, and sort of move forward. So, just small steps towards better caring for ourselves in each realm of our life that stresses us out. And I would say, if you've never, unpacked feelings, try to sit down and just empty stream of consciousness. What do you find? I tell people, you may want to just empty it into the notes section of your phone as you're talking it out, just empty stream of consciousness. What is there? What do I feel today? How am I feeling in this moment? What do I need right now? Just a few prompts to kind of connect to that inner world and see what you learn. When we read back over the things that we are thinking, we often see them differently than when they were in our head.
Mhm.
They become something we can manage, something that we could maybe problem solve, something we need to let go of because we can't. But either way, it makes it tangible. But we
Yes.
just start small, and don't put too much pressure on ourselves to revamp it all at the same time. It's a
Yes,
journey.
absolutely. I love it. This is exactly it resonates with me as well. Like take small steps, do so small that you cannot fail. That's a kind of a
Yeah.
phrase. You
Yes.
come back to it.
Yeah.
And I just love what you said. Yeah, the compassion, give grace to yourself. So if you're listening, really, you might want to actually listen again, because there's so many nuggets in this interview, and especially the encouragement that you're sending. You're such a beautiful heart, and
Mhm.
thank you for sharing from your life, because this is what makes it meaningful, as opposed to, hey, I've learned this in the book, and you
Yes.
coming here and sharing this it's just so impactful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rana, for all that you're doing. And you've taken your personal story and turned it into a journey, as well, to help everyone else who's probably, we all struggle with this. So thank you for your ministry and for all that you do, as well. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, and then we'll connect, and who knows, maybe you'll come back with
I
more.
look forward to it
Yes, yeah.
anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Roxanne, for being here today. What a rich encounter. And I loved all the wisdom that you're sharing. And it's so beautiful to hear from your own personal experience and how that brought forth the fruits in all in the ministry and everything that you're sharing and teaching, and how you're helping your clients and patients. Thank you so much. And if you're listening to this, there's so many renewal nuggets. I hope you were able to take in just a few, or if you want to come back and re-listen, I encourage you to do that. And with that, thank you for all you do in the world, for giving, for having a mission in this world, a ministry. Or maybe you're at a point where you're not quite sure what to do. Maybe you're in transition with that. Rest assured, the wisdom will come. As Dr. Roxanne said, we are from her dad. I love that image. We're on the journey, on walking on the mountain, and it's not over until it's over. So no matter where you are in your season, I want you to be encouraged and continue to regenerate and renew. And with that, hope you have a wonderful week, and I say goodbye for now.